Hello and welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. Indiana Republicans have a supermajority at the State House, but there is a growing rift within the GOP.
Definitely seeing those cracks get bigger. The issue, of course, is redistricting. Tuesday was Organization Day, the day everybody comes back to Indianapolis, talks about their priorities for the year ahead. And then comes the annual vote at the end to return in January for the session. But this vote was much different.
Yeah, that's because lawmakers were supposed to meet on December 1st to take up the issue of redistricting.
The governor called a special session to make it happen, but Senate President Pro Tem Bray says there just aren't enough votes to redraw the congressional maps, and so he is not going to bring senators back to try.
Right, and now Governor Braun says that might mean Senate Republicans need a change of leadership. It was just Tuesday morning when Governor Braun, House Speaker Todd Huston, and Senate President Pro Tem Bray sat together at an event in the State House. Just days after the Senate voted to not reconvene for a special session on redistricting, though, Governor Braun said he'd support Bray being replaced as its leader.
I'm getting to that point.
Braun also said he'd support any primary challenges to legislators who didn't support redrawing the state's congressional districts.
I think it does carry political consequences. You can do it and stand on that hill, but then you're going to have to defend it.
Senator Bray has. After Tuesday's vote, he told reporters that many in his caucus didn't think redistricting was the way to gain more Republican seats in Congress.
A number of our caucus members, myself included, don't see this as a binary choice between the 7-2 ratio they have right now and redistricting and getting to an automatic 9-0.
House Speaker Todd Huston told reporters redistricting wasn't dead in the House and asked members to keep the first 2 weeks of December open.
I think Rod needs to do the simple thing, get in line, at least bring it to a public discussion in his own chamber. And I think if that occurs, it's a different vote count, too.
Governor Braun has also said he's looking at ways to force the Senate to meet and deal with redistricting.
The way I read the Constitution and the laws and even the Senate procedures, I'm not sure the governor has any option.
IU professor and former Republican mayor of Fort Wayne, Paul Helmke, now an independent, says there's nothing in the Indiana Constitution that gives the governor authority to force the Senate to convene. Only the leaders of each chamber can do that, said Helmke, through something called anti-bolting procedures, which gives leaders in the House and Senate the authority to bring charges against a legislator who doesn't show up for work. In the Senate's case, that's Senator Bray. But he's already indicated with his vote on Tuesday he supports not coming back until the first week of January. So what if some senators do show up to the State House those first 2 weeks in December anyway?
You could theoretically have a group show up on December 1, argue that and if Rod Bray doesn't show, argue that his absence means that he's in effect vacated the seat and select somebody new.
But Helmke says under the current rules of the Senate, a move like that comes with notice requirements and likely would face challenges in court. As for where the governor stands on Bray,
he's made some conscious decisions to make it difficult, at odds with almost everyone else in the party. So he'll have to deal with that. Hopefully he'll come around. It's not too late to do it, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, so did the governor say if he had anyone in mind to replace Bray?
No, he didn't. That would really be up to the state senators anyway.
And to replace him, they would actually have to be in the Senate.
Right, 2/3 of them. Now, I spoke with State Senator Liz Braun, and she told me at least she will be at the State House on December 1st, and she expects some other senators to be there too. Now, we didn't talk to her about Senator Bray or his position on redistricting or replacing him. Braun did say she hoped if enough senators were there on December 1st, they could get some work done. What that work is, though, remains to be seen. Braun says she's not sure if members of the House will come in on that day, too. House Speaker Todd Huston said this week he told his members to keep the first 2 weeks of December open.
Not really sure if the House comes in, which I've heard different things they may or may not, on Monday, December 1st, if that compels us to come in or not. But I'm going to be prepared to go to work.
For any official business to happen, a certain number of senators would have to be there. Under the Indiana Constitution, that's 2/3 of the members. Braun pushed back on the idea that redistricting had caused a schism among Indiana Senate Republicans, pointing to the debate that occurred during the special session that saw lawmakers passing an abortion ban.
People think because we're all on the same party that we all believe exactly the same, and that's not true. And sometimes these discussions can be heated and animated in private, and sometimes they're in public. But at the end of the day, we're all still Republicans and we're on the same team.
Braun told me that she is still hopeful that Republicans can get on the same page with this so that the Senate can still take up redistricting. So she's not giving up.
And someone who's Also not giving up hope is the governor. I sat down with Mike Braun this week to talk about some issues, including redistricting and President Trump's pressure to get it done. Here's our conversation. On redistricting, you've taken a lot of heat from President Trump this week for the Senate's decision not to meet on congressional redistricting. You sent a statement late yesterday that said, "Now I am left with no choice other than to explore all options at my disposal to compel the state Senate to show up and vote." What did you mean by that?
So compel is a word that means we're not going to just take what Rod Bray did and accept that as the end of the story. And the point yesterday that needs to be emphasized is that the House said they're not adjourning until January. Be prepared to come back and produce maps that if they do that, then that even changes the dynamic more so. The other thing to be noted is from yesterday, half his caucus is now on a public vote to where they did not want to adjourn. Nearly half. I think it was one vote short of that. He had to get that done with Democrats. I don't think there's been a major thing that's happened in our legislature in recent times where he had to get Democrats to get him over the finish line. I think he made the move a week or so ago because the organic approach, which did take longer, I felt he was working the clock. There were too many senators flipping. There are more publicly for redistricting than there are against it. And he and his leadership team have just been against it. Most Republicans in the state, conservatives, want to do it. Our entire congressional delegation wants to do it. One of the two senators is publicly for it, and most of the state office holders have been publicly for it. Not to mention that the Democrats are the ones complaining, along with liberal and moderate independents, because they've done it to the max. They don't have much more room to go, and when you look at the imbalance out there currently, 6 bluest states outside of California have been this way for decades. No Republican congressman. You look at Illinois next to us, 17 congressional seats. 14 of them are Democrats because you ought to see their maps. Looks like salamanders with tails into the southern part of the state. That's the inherent disadvantage. That's what we're trying to fair up.
And so are you saying that the Senate can be compelled to come back even if Rod Bray doesn't call them back, or you think that they will change their mind?
I think they'll change their mind, and then once they're in session, then they've played the clock. So that means they've dug in even further. There's a lot of stuff procedurally, including the lieutenant governor, including any senator of the 19 that are now officially on board that can do things. So we're like in the second or third inning. He's made a very bold decision to rebuke the governor, the vice president, and the president. And he's also rebuking most Republicans and conservatives because the people showing up at the meetings are clearly Democrats and moderate and liberal independents.
Are you saying you will back primary challenges to those senators who oppose
that would be a longer term probably approach, and yes, the president's obviously said that, and we do it too, because think what the Senate did on real property tax reform. They gave me the bill as I proposed it, immediately gutted it to nothing, and it took 3 months to get reasonable, we're not done with that yet, property tax reform. So they kind of set the stage of how that was going to be, and thank goodness to the House, Jeff Thompson, Speaker Houston, that was a reasonable product. The very far right and maybe some individuals here in media didn't like it, but for most people, when they see that 2/3 of their home will be exempted from property taxes in 5 years, and we only got it passed with 2 Senate votes to spare, kicking and screaming the whole way, finally, due to the House, due to our persistence, we got that. So maybe that can happen here. Rod is digging in, He's making the hole deeper, and I think that has long-term political consequences, especially if it's going to be an indication of what we should be doing with an enterprising legislature, an enterprising and entrepreneurial governor on the issues most people are concerned about, kitchen table. We've done that already, but they've made it difficult because they've been a wet blanket on health care reform, on property taxes, and other stuff.
Why not just put more resources into flipping the first district? I mean, the Republican candidate almost won a couple of years ago.
Until she got close, and the Democrats have so much more money nationally, they made that not happen, because that's one that's got a high profile. It gets a little closer. Hasn't been a Republican there, I think, in 96 years. You know why it is getting closer? Because people are leaving Illinois because they're tired of that kind of government that mirrors what the federal government does. But that is a long road to get there. And if we get close, they would defend that with unlimited resources. They always outfund us on that 3-1, and they do it again.
We want to now bring in Nikki Kelly, editor of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. Nikki, what are you hearing from lawmakers right now? What's your take?
Oh gosh, I hear a lot of frustration, and it's from both sides, right? It's people who feel like they're being asked to vote on something when we don't have a map, we don't have a bill. They're getting pressured from the top down. And frankly, you know, they're getting tired of it. We're going on 4 months of this. On the same time, I hear people who do support it are frustrated because they feel like people aren't, quote, getting in line. I think Governor Braun used that statement. And, you know, so I've never seen anything this nasty within the Republican Party during my time.
Nikki, I've spoken with Democrats. Obviously, they oppose redistricting. Normally, they're kind of the bystanders when the Republican supermajority does their thing. But with this big of a divide, can they have any influence here?
No. I mean, they might have enough now. I mean, the House says they already have the 51 votes, period. We now see that the Senate Republican caucus is basically completely deadlocked at 2020. So if you add the Democrats, you'd have enough to defeat it, but they're never gonna, you know, that's why Bray isn't coming in, because while I don't think he obviously doesn't support it, I don't think he would want to see it actually defeated, right? I mean, that would be far worse than just not voting on it.
Do you see Republicans in the Senate coming in December 1st? Just
Some
to
of them.
support
Yeah, I'm sure
cause?
there will be some people sitting at their desk doing some work and trying to make a point that they're there, showing up for their job. And that is I guess, a criticism that Senator Bray has opened themselves up for. I mean, we couldn't find a single time when the legislature has ignored a special session call from the governor. Even we spoke to former House Speaker Brian Bosma, and he said that he believes they should have to come in, even if they just come in and then gavel out, you know, come in, take attendance, do your prayer, and gavel out. But they are setting a pretty big precedent to completely ignore the governor.
How do you see this playing out? Is it possible the House can put together some sort of proposal, work on it, and then reintroduce it in January to give it to the Senate when they're all back in the general session?
I don't know about that. I mean, the filing deadline is early. The period opens early January, closes early February. I don't know that any of them are going to be willing to do that, to change the maps when people have already filed for a congressional seat. That would be pretty different.
To this point of replacing Senator Bray, do you think that picks up steam as we go forward?
I mean, in essence, they'd still be stalemated, right? Because they don't have enough to pass the bill. If they had enough to pass the bill, they'd have enough to replace Senator Bray. Okay. So with them kind of at even numbers, 1919, maybe 2020, I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon.
Well, President Trump is the one who pushed for redistricting in the first place. The goal is to try and pick up more Republican seats in the House in the midterm congressional elections next year. The GOP just has a slim majority right now. And the president, he's been slamming the lawmakers who are holding out on redistricting, really cranking up the pressure through social media.
Right, and he isn't the only one applying pressure. At least 5 lawmakers have been threatened over the past week, all of them Republican state senators.
Thursday night, Senator Kyle Walker, who represents Lawrence, said he had faced what he called violent threats. He sent a statement saying, in part, and we'll put it on the screen here, all state leaders should send the strongest message possible that not only are these violent threats and intimidation tactics against the law, they're also counter-effective.
Right, and 13 News reporter Rich Nye spoke with state police about the rash of threats.
4 state senators confirm they have been the targets of swatting attempts. Greg Good of Terre Haute, Dan Darnell of Highland, Rick Niemeyer from Lowell, and Spencer Deary of West Lafayette.
Swatting is very simply when somebody who, whatever their motivation happens to be, phones in, emails in, texts in an emergency call to a targeted location with the hope that a large police presence will show up.
The swatting incidents began Saturday around 5 p.m. The Terre Haute Police Department received an email saying that harm had been done to people inside a home in southeastern Vigo County. The police showed up to what they learned was the home of State Senator Greg Good. There was no danger. 2 more swatting attempts happened Wednesday and another Thursday morning, all against Republican state senators who have not voiced support for a special legislative session on redistricting.
Absolutely terrible. We can stand for none of that. This is about a political discussion that can't have any of that. All I'm saying is, governor, leader of the state, stop it.
Republican Governor Mike Braun wants the Senate to come to the State House next month to vote on redistricting. After this morning's swatting attempt in West Lafayette, State Senator Spencer Deary issued a statement that included, "It is disturbing that anyone would attempt to harm or intimidate lawmakers, but sadly not all that surprising in the current environment." Because of similar multiple incidents across the state, Indiana State Police have taken over the investigations.
These are dangerous. They're dangerous situations. They drain resources, and they're illegal.
That was our Rich Nye reporting. And Nikki, again, as Rich mentioned, Spencer Deary mentioned in that statement about the swatting threat that he faced. He said he was not surprised given the current environment. You just said a few minutes ago you don't remember things being this heated, this polarized in your career at the State House.
And all over one issue. It seems like, it's become this, absolute, it doesn't matter if we agree on 99 things on this one issue. If I don't agree, you're a rhino or, a Republican in name only. So it has gotten very nasty.
Kyle Walker said in his statement that these threats were counterproductive. Do you see these threats as working in any way to get any of these senators to change their mind on where they stand, or to even take some of them that haven't taken a stand publicly to come out and say where they stand?
No, I don't think they're going to work. I think if you've already set your mind on the issue, they're going to reinforce that. They're going to make you be even more strong in your belief. And I've heard behind the scenes that it's really turning even some of the supporters who might be on the edge of supporting, it's turning them off to see this going after their own colleagues.
Yeah, it's gotten difficult. It's gotten nasty. You have to wonder about the security measures people are taking just to
and
feel
even
safer
on Organization Day, there were more police around. And I was reading a Politico report this morning where Senate President Bray sat down, and he said that before he made that announcement on Sunday, he went to the state police and his local law enforcement to talk through what he needed to do to keep his family safe. And that's honestly just really sad.
Wow. Yeah. These are the times we're in. Yep. Nikki, thank you as always for joining us. We really appreciate it.
We've got much more to come here on Crossroads Politics. Redistricting wasn't the only topic Governor Braun wanted to talk about this week.
There's going to be a focus on entrepreneurship like we've never seen before.
About strengthening businesses on Main Street is coming up next.
And then the big development out of Washington, President Trump signs off on releasing the so-called Epstein files when the public could see them, ahead on Crossroads Politics. Governor Mike Braun has his hands full pushing for mid-decade redistricting, but he says he's still keeping a focus on his roots.
And that would be small business. The governor ran his own business for years, and he spoke with me this week about his administration's focus on Main Street in his first year. Governor, when you and I sat here and you were running for office, you said you wanted to be a governor for small business, for the little guy on Main Street. So nearly a year into your term, what does that look like? How has that gone?
Well, number one, the reason is my wife and I both come from that Main Street small business, and she's still running hers into the 47th year, and she started 3 years before I did, and I did it for 37 years, a very scrappy small business that went regional and then national. 3 of our 4 kids run it now, so those are our roots. And here, it's the opportunity where small business in Main Street generally gets completely disregarded in the whole discussion of economic development. Of course, this being Entrepreneurship Week, and you notice the only agency that I created, because I'm trying to get them to be fewer and leaner, was the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So it is just simply saying that we've got one of the best environments for small business in the country, yet we have some of the fewest startups. So that's a disconnect. That means that through our educational systems, we're not emphasizing it enough. Through all the things that would nurture that, junior achievement has kind of been the old format. Now you've got here in Indy a started up that's expanded into 69 counties. They've got an excellent competition. Love it. We're going to try to get that into all 92. And there's something called the High School Hustle that I was at. I was at both of those competitions. So I'm going to encourage it, but now there's going to be a focus on entrepreneurship like we've never seen before, and along with that, innovation. Almost all of the big companies that we know recently come from technology, biosciences. It's different from what it would have been years ago when it was hard manufacturing. China has taken a lot of that, especially where it's been high labor content, simple manufacturing. We need to emphasize the whole spectrum. Existing businesses that want to stay here and do more, they're beyond being Main Street, and then there'll be some large businesses that have special attributes, high wages, high growth, that we'll want to bring in. But fertilizing the field of Main Street and entrepreneurs is what it's about, because if we do that better, that's organic, it costs a lot less, and that's where most of the jobs are created. Big businesses house a disproportionate amount of them, but they don't grow them once they become large. That happens every time a small business is created.
Does the legislature play a role in this? Do you think more needs to be done as far as taxes?
I think
tax
on that
changes?
issue that we'd all be simpatico, and if we need to, we'll, I think, get that done. But a lot of that I can do administratively, and just how through the Economic Development Commission, I've completely reconstituted that board with the emphasis on regions, Main Street, existing businesses, and new businesses that we'd want to lure in, but with heavy emphasis on the granular approach of entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Still ahead, a court orders a stop to the National Guard deployment in the nation's capital.
And President Trump authorizes the release of the so-called Epstein files. That's next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back. After months of resistance, President Trump signs a bill forcing the Justice Department to release their findings related to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Hallie Jackson takes a look at what's next.
With a single signature from President Trump, a long-shot bill now becomes law, requiring the DOJ to release unclassified documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. The president, in a lengthy online post, taking credit for the nearly unanimous vote in Congress, despite his months of resistance, and blasting Democrats, again calling attention on the Epstein case a hoax.
It's a big victory for the survivors, a big victory for transparency, and a big victory for the American people.
It's a moment some Epstein survivors have been waiting years to see. The family of prominent Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who died by suicide earlier this year, calling it monumental, adding, "This work is not finished. Every name must be revealed." The Justice Department now has 30 days to release material, although the law makes some exceptions when it comes to victims' privacy.
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
The Attorney General can also withhold certain information that would jeopardize an ongoing investigation, which includes the one the president just ordered to look into what he says are Democrats' connections to the late sex offender. Even after the DOJ said this summer it did not uncover evidence to warrant charging anyone else.
What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's new information.
The Attorney General not elaborating, but it could include material from Epstein's estate, some of which was recently released by the House, revealing extensive correspondence between Epstein and former Harvard president Larry Summers. He's now taking leave from the university, an abrupt reversal after appearing in class Tuesday and saying this.
I've said that I'm going to step back from public activities, but for a time, but I think it's very important to fulfill my teaching obligations.
Now, his spokesperson saying Summers decided in the best interest of the university to step back as Harvard undertakes its review of his Epstein ties.
That's Hallie Jackson reporting. Also this week, a federal judge ordered President Trump to end the deployment of National Guard troops in the nation's capital.
That order came a little more than 24 hours after Governor Braun announced the deployment of 300 Hoosier Guard members to D.C. next month.
The judge says the military involvement to police the nation's capital violates the Constitution, and she said it illegally intrudes on the authority of local law enforcement.
A very belated September jobs report came out this week, and the news was positive.
Yeah, the economy reportedly added 119,000 jobs in September, but August was revised to show 4,000 jobs lost.
Unemployment rose to 4.4%, the highest it's been since 2021. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also reported that there will be no October jobs report because of the government shutdown.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. For Rich Nye and all of us here at 13 News, thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time.